Now in this section, we introduce a couple of new and very closely related economic concepts known as consumers surplus and producers surplus. And we will start off by trying to build a conceptual understanding of what these things really are, and then we will finally want to show on this graph of demand and supply the exact areas that represent the amount of consumer and the amount of producer surplus in the market of some given product. And we will start off to build our understanding by considering this market for computers, where initially, as usual, we have the demand and supply of computers, which give you an equilibrium price P star and an equilibrium quantity Q star. And we assume that it is a free market, that there are only two main players, the consumers and producers. There is no government, no third person or economic agent involved. And to make things more concrete, let us give some numbers here. Let's assume that this Q star is equal to 100 computers and this P star is equal to 50,000. And that is, in this free market of computers, currently there are a total of 100 computers that are being produced and sold and bought, each at a price of 50,000 rupees. Now, you see, usually the consumers would complain that prices in the market are unreasonably too high or too steep, and the producers would also complain that the prices are unreasonably low. But the point that we want to focus on this video is that, look, regardless of how unreasonable or unfair the prices may be according to the producer and consumers, the fact that some producers and consumers, they come to this market and they trade these 100 computers. Those consumers and producers who are involved in buying and selling all of these 100 computers, they must be getting some benefit out of these purchases, out of these transactions, or we say out of participating in this market and being a producer and a consumer. Why? Because you see, this is a free market and there is no compulsion. And we assume that in a free market, all these producers and consumers, they are intelligent, sharp, and greedy, self-interested individuals. So if they buy something, it means they must be getting some benefit out of it. And if a producer sells something, then it means he must be getting some benefit out of it. And we want to measure that benefit basically. So if we think about the consumers, first of all, what sort of benefit are we talking about by buying a particular good? To understand that, just imagine that the first person or the one of the customers who comes in to buy one of these 100 computers, let's imagine is a student, and he comes to this market to buy this computer because he has an upcoming A-level exam that has to be conducted online, and this guy for some reason doesn't own a computer currently. Now if you ask this person that, look, what is the maximum price that you will be willing to pay to buy a computer? And I know that sometimes it's not possible even for ourselves to sort of know what is the maximum I would be willing to pay for something, but it's a theoretical model. So let's assume this guy knows and he tells you that, look, at this moment I need a computer very desperately. I will waste my couple of years of hard work preparing for my A-level exam if I don't have a computer. So at this time, if he tells you that, look, I am willing to pay a maximum price of even 500,000 rupees for this computer. Now let's call that P max, the maximum price that some consumer is willing to pay for one of these computers. Now let's imagine then that there is a second customer that comes in. He again happens to be a student facing a similar problem. He has an upcoming online exam and he doesn't own a computer. But this student, let's assume, is an 8th grader who has to sit for a midterm exam online. So not that important. So he will still value this computer, and if you ask him what is the maximum price that you are going to be willing to pay, then maybe let's say he tells you that, look, my maximum willingness to pay right now would be 300. Again, doesn't mean he will have to pay 300. And then consider another consumer, the third one. This guy, he has no urgent need for a computer. He just needs it for casual everyday use. He just wants to waste some time over Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and so on and so forth. So if you ask him, what is your maximum willingness to pay for this computer, the maximum price you would be willing to pay, maybe he tells you it's just 35,000 rupees. Now, as compared to this maximum willingness to pay of all these various consumers, the price that they will have to actually pay, so let's call that price actually pay, so PA. The price actually they will all have to pay is simply the market price of 50,000 for a computer. So this guy here, who is willing to pay a maximum of 500, he will only have to pay 50,000 rupees and he'll get this computer. And you already should see the benefit he is getting. He's getting something by just paying 50,000, whereas the maximum price he would have been willing to pay is 500. So net he, in a way you can say, gets a benefit of 450 rupees. And it is this benefit, this difference between the maximum price that a consumer is willing to pay minus the price that he actually has to pay. This is what is known as the consumer's surplus, the benefit to the consumer from buying something. Now it depends from the consumer to consumer, their maximum willingness to pay. The second guy, he also gets some satisfaction out of a computer, but the maximum price he is willing to pay is just 300. This in a way reflects the value of a computer for him, that the maximum I am going to pay is 300. He will again actually only have to pay the market equilibrium price of 50,000. So the difference of 250 is the benefit to this consumer from participating in this market and buying this good. And we give this benefit, this difference between the maximum he is willing to pay versus what he actually pays. That difference is known as the consumer surplus to the second consumer, or you can say on the second unit of computer that is transacted in this market. Now what about this third guy? He will also actually have to pay 50, but his maximum willingness to pay is just 35. This is the value he places on this computer. So this is the sort of guy who will come to this market. He will try to negotiate hard and get a discount, but we are assuming everybody will eventually have to pay the market price of 50. So he will go back without buying a computer. It's not worth his 50,000 rupees. If you keep on doing this thing for all the other 98 customers, you will find some 98 consumers who have come here and bought one of these computers. So there will be some 98 more consumers who will have a maximum willingness to pay of 50 or more. So they will buy this product. And if you calculate the consumer surplus on each computer and then add all those consumer surpluses, what you will get is the total consumer surplus in the market. Now, you will never have to do such a long calculation, but all you need to remember from this thing, the most important is that, look, this is what a consumer's surplus is. The maximum price that a consumer is willing to pay, any consumer is willing to pay for a unit of a product, minus the price that he will actually have to pay. This difference is what is known as consumer's surplus, and this is what you need to remember. As far as these calculations are concerned, the examiner will give you the maximum price that somebody is willing to pay. He will also tell you the price that is actually paid usually, and then you will have to do the simple subtraction to calculate your consumer surplus. Nothing complicated. All you need to be careful about is that sometimes the examiner will ask you what is the consumer surplus on the second computer, and sometimes he will ask you what is the total consumer surplus on two computers. So on the second computer, this is your consumer surplus on that individual unit of a computer. On two computers, your total consumer surplus is the consumer surplus on the first plus the second. So that is the only sort of thing that you need to be careful about. Otherwise, pretty straightforward stuff. Now, on the other hand, the other part of the market is the producer, the sellers who participate by selling a product. And we said that they will always or commonly complain that the prices are unfair. But as long as they sell, they must be making or getting some benefit out of it. Now, the way we think about the benefit received by the producer is that, you see, every producer, they have a certain minimum price, the lowest price at which they would still agree to sell. They won't sell if the price is even lesser than that minimum price, but they will have a certain minimum price. Again, they will not advertise it. They will not tell everybody that this is the minimum at which I will still agree to sell. But what we are saying here is that in their minds, all the producers, they will always have a certain minimum price. So P minimum. And then we compare this minimum price that they would accept with the price that they this time actually receive, which is again going to be 50,000 per computer. So let's imagine that there is one seller whose minimum acceptable price is 30,000 for a computer. So this guy would make a total or earn a total benefit. This producer will earn a total benefit of 50 minus 30 or 20 rupees. Why? Because he would have been willing to sell this even at a price of 30, but now he's actually receiving 50. So he earns a surplus of 20 rupees. Now there might be another guy next door who is willing to sell a computer at a minimum price of 25 even. Maybe he owns the shop instead of sitting in a rented shop, so his costs are lower and therefore he can afford to sell this computer even at a price of 25,000. This guy will also again get the actual price of 50. So the difference of 25 is going to be his producer surplus. And again, you can measure the producer surplus on each unit, add them all up, and what you get is the total producer surplus received by all the producers by participating in the market. Now again, the most important thing that you need to remember here is this equation, that the producer surplus, it is simply the difference between the price producer actually receives minus the minimum price he would have been willing to accept.